It's The Law with Morelli Chertko. Joining me is Chris Ross today, and Chris practices family law, civil litigation, personal injury, and today we're talking about options for resolving issues after separation. All right, Chris, I guess we'll start with after a person separates, why should they see a lawyer?
Well, after you separate, Howie, of course, it's a really emotional time for most people, right? And with that emotional time, we don't tend to make the best decisions as humans in emotional periods of time. And people often don't know what their rights and what their options are after separating. And after you do separate, that's why it's best to at least see a lawyer to understand your rights and your options. And you don't necessarily need to hire a lawyer, but at least knowing what options you have and what your rights are going forward can help you with dealing with your ex and being able to deal with the issues and hopefully resolve them in an amicable way.
If the parties are getting along after separation, is there any need to take any further steps after separation?
Now, it's not necessary to take any further steps, but you can leave yourself open to issues down the line if you don't take any further steps when you are getting along. Really, when you think about it, the time to either, to come to an agreement with your partner or do things that, put things into perspective for the future and make things concrete is when you're getting along with your partner. And I mean, sometimes people are able to go, many years, and they go the entire time after they've separated without an agreement or a court order or anything like that. And that's great. But we do see it quite regularly where people are coming into us and they've gotten along for 6 months, a year, 2 years, sometimes even longer. And then there's problems, but nothing's in writing and nothing's set in stone. And then there's no rights that are set out and any obligations for the parties to follow.
What can a person do after separation to resolve those outstanding issues with the ex-partner?
Well, again, there's a number of options there. I mean, of course, the one is just you informally deal with them and you don't have any agreement or anything like that. One good option and one we suggest is a separation agreement, and that's something at least that sets out the rights and it deals with all of the outstanding issues. It deals with your property, your children, your parenting, your spousal support possibly, and even your divorce, right? And so it deals with everything on one document, and if you are getting along, or even if you're not getting along that well, but you can come to an agreement through a separation agreement, that will put your rights going forward in stone for you. If you're not getting along to the point where you can come to an agreement with a separation agreement, you can go through mediation, and you can do that either privately, or there's some forms where you can have free mediation. There's Family Justice out there, which allows you to go, and there's people that help facilitate an agreement between the parties through a mediation type process, and that's free, which definitely finances are an issue for people sometimes after separation, and that's a good way to try and resolve the issues if you can't deal with your ex yourself.
Some people do the homemade separation agreement. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, again, Howie, you can do a homemade separation agreement, right? But from our perspective, it's generally not advisable. Sometimes we see these homemade separation agreements. They come in and they don't necessarily deal with anything. They forget about the pension division. They forget about, certain things that a lawyer deals with on an everyday basis. And really, there is some cost to doing a separation agreement with a lawyer. From our perspective, and really from the client's perspective, it should be that, it's a little bit of cost up front, which may seem like quite a bit at the initial stage, but it could save you a lot down the road. But a properly done separation agreement is going to protect you better down the road and prevent possibly further litigation than a homemade separation agreement will in almost all cases.
Okay, so if the parties are unable to reach an agreement, what are their options at that point?
Well, if you can't mediate, you can't come to a separation agreement, and you can't deal with the other party sort of informally, really at that stage your option is going to court, unfortunately, and that's not ideal, but that's the reality for some people. And if you do need to go to court, there's a lot of different hurdles and obstacles that you're going to have to overcome and understand, and that's really what the option you're left with at that point.
You can file both or either in provincial court or Supreme Court. What's the difference?
So the difference between provincial and Supreme Court, some people do start an action in provincial court because they want to get through things maybe a little bit quicker, because provincial court is a little bit quicker. But then you have child support and parenting issues in provincial court, but then you have to deal with your property issues in Supreme Court, which really isn't the best scenario for anyone in those situations.
Good information. Thanks a lot, Chris, and appreciate you being on this edition of It's the Law.
Thanks a lot, Howie.
There's Chris Ross from Morelli Churtco.